This week, join me as I explore the mystery of the Civil War that still haunts the South today. The disappearance of the HL Hunley. It was the pride of the Confederacy, the first submarine ever to sink an enemy ship in combat. We've got the latest discoveries and exclusive new clues. So we might just be able to put this mystery to rest once and for all. This captain's watch could be the sub's black box. Can this newly discovered hunk of iron the missing piece of the Civil War's last great puzzle?
So that could have been a huge contributing factor as to why the Hunley went down.
We'll test the evidence from the Hunley's historic mission. Did CO2 poisoning doom the crew?
And using 10 pounds of C4 will replicate the explosion of the Hunley's spar torpedo.
Why did this famous sub never make it home? We're digging for the truth and going to extremes to do it. Standing in the conning tower of the USS Hawaii, one of the newest nuclear submarines in the world, stationed at the U.S. Navy's first sub base in Groton, Connecticut. Hi, I'm Hunter Ellis. This place is known as the submarine capital of the world, and I might not be standing on top of this magnificent vessel if it weren't for the HL Hunley, the first submarine to ever sink an enemy ship in combat. In February 1864, as the Civil War reached its deadly peak, a desperate South launched a secret weapon new to warfare, a submarine named the HL Hunley. It succeeded beyond the Confederates' wildest dreams, sinking one of the Union's largest battleships. Yet that same night, the victorious sub and its crew of 8 men disappeared. The search for the pride of the South and her crew consumed the city of Charleston, South Carolina for more than a century. It was finally discovered 4 miles from the coast of Charleston under 30 feet of murky water. In 2000, all 14 tons of its iron shell was raised, filled with more than 9 tons of sediment. After 136 years on the ocean floor, a new chapter in the mystery of what sank the Hunley began. To get my first look at the legendary sub, I head for the Warren Lash Conservation Center near Charleston Harbor. The Confederacy's last great hope is now kept in a 76,000-gallon tank of cold, fresh water to help protect its hull from further corrosion. Archaeologist James Hunter introduces me to the vessel that changed naval warfare forever.
Wow, this is unbelievable. This is like getting to see the Wright brothers' first airplane. Now this is a piece of history right here.
Absolutely.
And it's small.
Very small. The maximum height is 4 feet. The maximum width is 3.5 feet. And the entire crew compartment,
wow,
all 8 of these guys are crammed into. It's only 22 feet long. So it's extremely small.
And the incredible thing is, Lieutenant Dixon and his crew spent at least 2 hours in this sub, cranking it 4 miles out to sea to surprise their target in the dark.
Man, I could not imagine spending as much time in here as those 8 men did.
I can't either.
That's a daring task.
There are ideas that the torpedo that it used may have sunk it. There are ideas that they could have been hit by the ship that came to assist Housatonic. We have all kinds of different ideas.
Right.
But at this point, these are only ideas. We've got to collect all the information.
So it's like a time capsule?
Absolutely, in the most literal sense.
This was on the bottom of the Atlantic for 136 years. Unbelievable.
Archaeologists have literally found thousands of clues buried inside the Hunley. But they're still struggling with its mystery. What sent this pioneering sub to the bottom of the ocean? And did her dedicated crewmen ever have a chance to survive?
But what would cause men to be so desperate to lock themselves in here? Let's go see if we can find out.
To get inside the history that provoked the Hunley's historic mission, I go straight to a native son of South Carolina, who's agreed to take me out into the waters of Charleston Harbor.
He's also the chairman of the Hunley Commission, State Senator Glenn McConnell.
I'm looking forward to the tour today.
Well, let me tell you, we're going out in what I call the harbor of history, and I think you're going to see the whole story here.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Pull the anchors.
As we settle in next to Fort Sumter, I start to get a true perspective of what dire straits the South was facing in 1864.
What was life like back then?
Started out fancy at the start of the war, but as the war wore on, this became like a war zone. Shelling almost nightly. It cut a big path of destruction through the city. The city was in rubble. Not a window pane left. The siege here was longer than the siege on Stalingrad or Leningrad in World War II. And these people were hanging on. The Union had to blockade completely across the mouth of this harbor, and they were cut off. This was their lifeline to the world, the gateway to the world. And they were not able to move the goods in and out. They had to break this blockade.
The Hunley was a modern marvel in its day, but it was primitive, unproven, and deadly dangerous. In 2 of its test runs, the sub sank. 13 crew members died, including the man who financed the sub, Horace Lawson Hunley. But the Confederates just hauled it up and sent it out again. On that fatal last night, the Hunley crew faced a back-breaking challenge. 7 men, under the command of Lieutenant George Dixon, powered the sub 4 miles out, turning its crankshaft by hand. It was a nightmare mission for the crew, and a wake-up call for the enemy.
Here is something unlike anything in the world that possibly could bring fear to that increasing presence of the United States Navy.
It's fish boat. Their worst fear basically come true. By the time the sailors on the deck of the Housatonic spot the Hunley, it's too late. The submarine is too close for the ship's cannons. They can't tip low enough to hit the Iron Menace. Their only defense is small arms fire. But the sub keeps coming and strikes the starboard side of the Union ship, then backs away, leaving its deadly 135-pound charge of black powder buried in the ship's hull. When the rebel sub is about 50 feet away, the torpedo charge explodes. Minutes later, the only parts of the Union ship left above the water are its tall masts and rigging. That's when an eyewitness reported seeing a blue light on the water. The prearranged signal for the Hunley crew to announce its victory to shore.
One of the men who went up the mast of the Housatonic says he saw a blue light on the water.
And they wouldn't have known about that signal.
They wouldn't have known about that signal.
That gives us a good indication that the Hunley crew was alive.
My guess is they survived the attack. Now we have the opportunity to open it and slowly close in on the ultimate secret, why she didn't come home.
To review the evidence, our Digging for the Truth archaeologist Dr. Kara Cooney gets a close-up look at the recovered sub with the Hunley Project's senior archaeologist, Maria Jacobson.
And what you're looking at here is the bow of the submarine.
And right there is Lieutenant Dixon's conning tower. That's where he was stationed.
Exactly.
And that's to make sure
When
that
archaeologists
everything
removed the hull plates of the submarine, they found it was filled entirely with fine sediment. It took almost 2 years to work their way through the packed mud hardened by time, layer by layer. But the good news was, this environment had created a time capsule, preserving artifacts important to the investigation. Once the excavation was complete, in-depth analysis began. The first tantalizing clues came from the hull itself.
You see the damage here around the...
It goes all the way to the propeller and it goes all the way
Yeah.
here.
When we raised the sub, this is what we saw.
So we have a big giant hole. We have a submarine that obviously didn't make it back to port. So this is a really obvious explanation for why it didn't make it back to port.
Possibly, yeah. One of the theories people had was that perhaps the vessel sank because it was hit by a surface vessel. A big ship impacted it on the surface and it went down.
Okay, now I can sense from your voice that archaeologically you think that this hole happened later? than all of the
initially-
Houstonic explosion activity?
Initially, we didn't know. The trick is to figure out when did it occur and how did it occur.
And what are the archaeological steps that you used to do that?
Well, initially, what we did was conduct a trench excavation through the hole. Here, right here where the hole is, we found all this intrusive material, shell material, and coal pieces. The stuff that's coming from the outside into the sub, no wonder there's a big gaping hole. But once we got below the lip of the hole, to a great amazement, we find none of that material. We find just fine mud, just very, very fine mud, which tells us this hole was not there initially. It's a later development.
This cannot be the reason that the submarine went down to the bottom.
Right.
If this hole in the sub isn't what caused the Hunley to sink, what did? To find out, we're going to examine clues from inside the wreck and see what secrets they can reveal. But first, I'll go down under it myself to experience what the Hunley crew might have felt on their daring mission. Could carbon dioxide have poisoned their air? When I saw the Hunley, the first thing I noticed was the limited amount of space for the crew. And now I want to get an idea of what that was like for them. I'm here to meet up with former Hunley Project Chief Historian Mark Reagan, who's built his own mini-sub. He's going to teach me how to fly it and then send me out on my own. This should be interesting. Hi, Mark. How's it going?
Fine, fine.
It's a beautiful vessel you have here.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you. We've been doing this for about 20 years now.
Well, I think I'm going to have a Beatles tune playing in my head when I get in there. Right. You've never heard that before,
No,
right?
I've never heard that one.
Yeah, now tell me a little bit about this sub. How deep have you been able to take this?
I've been down to 60 feet in it.
No kidding.
It's designed to go to over 250.
Wow. And it looks like it'd be a pretty good simulator for getting an idea of what the Hunley crew was experiencing underwater.
Pretty close. Basically, this simulates what Dixon would have experienced while diving the Hunley.
Lieutenant George Dixon was the sub's commander. Since he was charged with navigating the Hunley, he sat right underneath his conning tower to use its viewports to check their position. Sounds exciting. I'm ready. You say we dive right in?
Here we go.
In Charleston, I was blown away by how big the story of the Hunley still is today. Everyone has their own personal theory of what happened to the crew that night during their final moments. All right, so where do we get started? I want to experience their mission conditions firsthand by making a solo dive in the dark. But first, I need to master Mark's little sub. Here goes nothing. There is not a lot of room in here. Did the crew panic when something catastrophic happened? Or did they simply run out of oxygen? Maybe this will give me a clue.
Submerge. See the forward and aft vent valves right
Okay.
up.
Mark runs through the basic controls of the mini-sub.
The blow valves will bring you up, the vents will take you down.
Well, I hope I get that one right.
Yep, we're all set.
Here we go. All right.
Okay, I'm gonna get in communication with them. All right, remember how those motors work? All right, you're going forward.
At first, it feels a little like bumper cars.
Now you're going in reverse. You have to go forward.
Whoop.
No problem. There's bumpers on those motor guards.
But eventually, I get the hang of it.
All right, Hunter, go ahead and shut those motors off right there.
While you're getting the conning tower hatchway sealed, basically what I want is just a straight up and down dive.
And I want to close both of them as soon as I see it on the top, right?
Yeah, you're getting close. Okay, now just listen to me. They're going down nice and straight. Start to close them now. Close them all the way off now.
All right, they're all off, and I am submerged.
Yes, you might see Brian peeking in the windows.
Next stop, the bottom.
And touchdown. I can just see the bottom now through the forward viewing port.
Okay, this is what all I want from you right now is just to get acclimated. Just look out the windows and just, you're in the Hunley, you're sitting on the bottom. This is the first checkout dive. This is getting you totally acclimated to what Dixon went through.
I'll tell you, I mean, this is an incredible environment down here.
I mean, I can already feel it. Just my voice bounces off the walls, and I can feel the air. Just, I'm getting hot, and it's humid in here. But what I really want to do is make this same dive at night. I want to feel what the Hunley crew felt as they crept out into the Atlantic to make their historic attack.
All right, go ahead and shut them off now. Good.
Tell you, this is an eerie feeling in here.
The Hunley's target was 4 miles out to sea. Because of the sub's iron skin, Dixon's compass was unreliable. The men had to risk surfacing, not just for fresh air, but to get their bearings in the dark.
I mean, imagine being down here with 7 other crew members, and this is the only light you have to navigate by. You know, I sit here thinking about this, and if something catastrophic had happened and the sub had started to flood, I mean, this light would have been extinguished immediately. It would have been cold, and it would have been a mass panic down here. And, you know, it probably would have happened so fast they didn't even know what hit them. And it's a really, really scary thought to put yourself in their shoes.
In the Hunley, breathable air was a constant concern. Before their historic mission, Dixon and his crew had performed a test to see how long they could stay underwater without resurfacing. They proved they could remain submerged for 2.5 hours. But this was with the crew totally at rest. When the sub was in operation, the men inside had a job to do. To propel it forward, they had to turn the hand-powered crankshaft. How long could 8 men work in a sealed chamber? Did the Hunley crew suffocate before the sub sank? To find out, Kara and I enlist the help of Dr. William Dawson, Medical Director for Respiratory Care at Charleston's Roper St. Francis Hospital.
Hi, I'm Kara.
Nice to meet you. Well, I'm excited to do this. Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go.
Awesome.
He'll perform a maximum cardiopulmonary exercise test on yours truly.
Hunter's our guinea pig. We're going to
All right,
pick him
you
up,
take it, Eric.
and we're ready to go.
There's this question of what happened.
Exactly.
And so we try to figure out a little bit from the exercise test maybe what their physiological state would have been once they rammed the ship.
This test measures how much oxygen I'd use if I were a crewman on the Hunley, and how much carbon dioxide I produce with every exhaled breath. During the test, I'll be hooked up to a 12-lead EKG, or electrocardiogram. That's what all the wires are.
Did you guys get this from Pulp Fiction?
Let me help with that. Yeah. I'll help with that. I want to get him stressed.
Yes, Kara is gagging
I
me.
want to make
Yes,
sure that it's nice and tight.
The test measures the CO2 output levels in liters per minute. Dr. Dawson estimates that going full steam, I'll be producing around 2 liters of CO2 per minute. That would give the submerged crew about an hour and a half before CO2 levels become dangerous or even lethal. Is he right?
Okay, I gotta focus on the mission.
No talking. You do the test.
If my levels reach 4 liters per minute, it would cut the safe time underwater in half to a mere 45 minutes. How much time do they have?
Working out, we're going to see how much oxygen he needs, how much CO2 he puts out.
And is it fair to say that the crewmen of the Hunley were in worse shape than our fine specimen Hunter
I'm not,
here?
you know,
They smoked.
food historian, but they smoked. They had a diet. I mean, this was a city that was under siege. The food was coming in sporadically, I guess, and the diets were not so good.
The harder I work, the more CO2 I produce.
Carbon dioxide production is at about 1.2 liters a minute.
So Hunter, you're working really hard right now. You
270
feeling
watts.
it? Yeah.
This is, you know, imagine doing this for 45 straight minutes without stopping. That's what maybe we're asking them to do. And you're doing it with your legs, they never do it with their arms. Carbon dioxide production is 2 liters a minute.
So So our numbers are starting to go up.
He's got an air hunger sensation, and he's making a lot of carbon dioxide, 3.5 liters a minute.
3.5 liters a minute.
Carbon dioxide a minute. So if all 7 of them were working at this rate, you'd have 21 liters
in a
of
space
carbon dioxide.
that's about 575 cubic
And they'd be doing
feet.
that every minute.
So they're poisoning their air more and more.
And they're rebreathing the same stuff over and over again.
3 liters per minute would give the crew about an hour before needing to replenish their air.
His CO2 production is 5 liters a minute.
Yeah, those numbers are spiking.
And you can see them going up.
By the end, I was making almost 5 liters a minute.
And you can see him going up, and in just a minute he's going to move into the anaerobic range. Not quite yet, but you're getting there.
My CO2 production was going off the charts, and I'm just one guy. There were 8 men aboard the Hunley.
And he's about had enough, I think. He's going anaerobic, as they say. This is not sustainable for much longer.
The test lasted less than 15 minutes and really wore me out. To attack the Housatonic, the Hunley crew had to hand crank in that confined space for at least 2 hours, with limited opportunities to surface for fresh air.
And based on these tests, how much time do you think it would have taken for them to meet that end?
His actual carbon dioxide production is higher than I had calculated. I had figured about 1.75 to 2, and you're a similar size to the submariners. So you're producing more carbon dioxide than I had thought. So the time estimate for the 3 to 5% concentration in the sub would be more like 35 or 40 minutes instead of 60.
So it's less than you thought.
There's enough carbon dioxide production danger here in the length of the trip and the physical activity that a combination of carbon dioxide production, physical exhaustion, dehydration would have overcome the sailors, and they would not have been able to function and would have just gone out. The physiology of it is a very daunting thing.
So with the limits of the human body, limits of physics, limits of the ocean and what they're able to do, whether these guys knew it or not, this was a suicide mission.
I think you could say that. I mean, those are tough words, but they were certainly, the window of physiological safety and success for them was very small. I mean, I just think it's a physical task that's almost not possible to be completed.
We thought the obvious fear for the Hunley crew would be running out of oxygen. But in reality, the greater danger was carbon dioxide poisoning. They would have become disoriented, dysfunctional, maybe even unconscious. Prime conditions to make a fatal error. Coming up next, 21st century technology helps pinpoint the location of the Hunley's most precious cargo and its most vital clue to date. It was the world's first effective submarine, and it disappeared mysteriously 140 years ago. It's a puzzle modern forensics was designed to solve. This 3D crime scene photo of the sub was constructed piece by piece by archaeologist Mike Scafuri.
It's long, narrow, dark, wet, dirty.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to do very precise digital mapping on this project.
Okay. Now, digital mapping, so what does that allow you to do here?
Well, by taking it to the digital world, we can recreate it in 3 dimensions and rebuild the site and then begin our analysis and see it complete for the first time.
By the Hunley being on the bottom for 136 years, you're able to use technology that wouldn't have been available had they found it sooner, and therefore learn a lot more about it.
Absolutely. In this case, our primary focus early on was the human remains, the bones of the crew. We wanted to know where they were.
After using laser technology to map each item found in the Hunley, archaeologists scanned every bone to create its identical digital replica.
There's over 1 million points in this.
In just one skull?
Just on the mapping of just one skull alone. And this was done for each and every bone that we were going to put back in the site plan. That's over 1,000 bones that we scanned.
So this femur will now fit in that position right there?
Exactly. Then it was just a matter of snapping it in place.
Wow. So right, the femur goes right there, and now you can do this for every bone.
We can do that step by step, bone by bone, for each and every bone from the crew's remains.
Wow. That's incredible, just the detail you have. So here's the aft end of the sub, here's the bow. So this would be Lieutenant Dixon, correct?
That's right. This is where Lieutenant Dixon sat. The different colors represent the different individuals as identified by our forensic anthropologists, blue and tan and green and so on.
What are some things you can deduce by looking at the position of these bones? I mean, it doesn't look like anybody tried to scramble to get out.
Absolutely. One of the things we thought we might find was all of the crewmen bunched up under one of the conning towers trying desperately to get out in the last moment. But we don't see that at all. We see them pretty much at their stations. There's no evidence of a struggle to try and get out one end.
Like a panicked exit.
Exactly, exactly. There wasn't a mad pileup of the crew at one end, which means either they had no time or no means to try and escape. But remember, this is a 3.5 foot by 4 foot wide tube.
So there's not a whole lot of places to go.
There's not a lot of room. You're shoulder to shoulder with the guy next to you, and you don't have a lot of movement room anyway.
Thanks to my CO2 exercise test, we know that carbon dioxide could have easily disabled the Hunley crew. And we now know that the men's bones were found at their individual duty stations, which makes this theory very plausible. After the bones' locations were carefully mapped, they were moved one last time. In 2004, the Hunley crew was buried at Magnolia Cemetery in North Charleston with full military honors. After 140 years, they were finally home. But their personal possessions are still in the lab, carefully preserved under the care of senior conservator Paul Mardikian.
We've got wood buttons, we've got rubber buttons, you've got porcelain buttons.
Most of what's been found in the sub are everyday items, but they help tell a complex story.
They were smokers. They were smokers.
I find it amazing. They're going out on this very, very dangerous mission, but they're bringing their pipe with them.
You cannot live without your pipe. It's impossible.
So, everything's a treasure, no matter how small. Even pencils and burnt matches that were used to light the candle.
Of course it does. It does. And what you're looking at is, you know, the humanity behind the artifacts. I mean, having just nice artifacts to show in a museum is not the goal.
Right.
What you're trying is to find out the individuals behind.
One of those individuals is the Hunley's commanding officer, Lieutenant George Dixon. And this must have been one of his most cherished possessions, a gold pocket watch found amongst his remains. It's also a key piece of evidence that Digging for the Truth is able to reveal exclusively for the first time.
We are trying to see if this is relevant or not. Does it mean anything for the history of the submarine?
Could the watch provide a timeline for the disappearance of the sub? The inner workings of the watch would take weeks to reassemble, but to everyone's surprise, the tiny, delicate hands on its face were still there, frozen in time at 8:23. But this in itself was a mystery. The Housatonic went down at about 8:45 p.m. Why would Dixon's watch have stopped some 20 minutes earlier?
I know the Housatonic sank at 8:45, right?
Yeah,
so
around
that's,
that time frame.
That's strange. Why would the watch stop before the Housatonic was hit?
What we have to understand is that the time they kept on the Housatonic and the time they kept locally in Charleston are different. Union kept a standard time. Now, Dixon would have set his timepiece to Charleston time.
So what's the difference between Union time and Confederate time?
26 minutes.
26 minutes. So 26 minutes is our difference, and we can add that to our 8:23.
Navy time.
So now we get 8:49.
Yes. We, of course, don't know precisely when the Housatonic went, but somewhere around that time frame.
But is that arbitrary? Did it just stop that way because it eventually wound out,
Well,
or did it stop for a reason?
That's the question, and that's what we have to investigate.
So the 8:23 on Dixon's pocket watch translates to 8:49 Union time, just about 4 minutes after the Housatonic went down. So what stopped the watch? Was it some kind of impact? Water damage? Could the watch have survived until 8:23 the next morning, slowly winding down? The evidence seems to suggest that it wound down.
What you're seeing is that the spring is completely loose.
The time kept going. And the watch didn't stop for any other reason.
But the trick is to discover, is this really the case, or can something else be going on? You have to go deeper.
Antique watch experts did go deeper. Their forensic tests proved that when the watch stopped, it was freshly wound. Then, after years of being underwater, corrosion released the spring. It's hard to believe just how valuable this information is. We now know that something happened to stop the freshly wound watch. If we can figure out what that was, maybe we can solve the mystery of what sank the Hunley.
It stopped because of what? Because of water or because of a shock wave? What stopped this watch?
At this point, we can't say. It could have stopped if water entered the watch, but it's also possible that the watch stopped because of an impact, but we can't tell.
Let's see if we can rule out one of those possibilities. Coming up next, in a test that's never been tried before, we attempt to solve the mystery of the Hunley by replicating her deadly torpedo and firing it. Right here by Charleston Harbor. I'm trying to solve the mystery that still haunts the South 140 years after the Civil War. What sank the Hunley, the world's first successful submarine? We've just examined a new clue, the captain's pocket watch. Its hands frozen about 4 minutes after the Hunley detonated its torpedo. Could the force of the blast have sunk the Hunley along with its target, the Housatonic?
So now I've seen the Hunley for myself, but we're still missing a critical piece. So let's see what the actual spar torpedo would have looked like by meeting up with historical explosives expert Mike Koshin.
Mike was able to reproduce the Hunley torpedo to scale thanks to the actual blueprints of its inventor.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hi, Hunter.
Good to see you.
Hunter, pleasure to meet you.
This Civil War torpedo isn't the sleek propeller-driven device our Navy uses today, which can be fired from more than 5 miles away. This torpedo required close ship-to-ship contact.
This is where the torpedo hunts. And on the other end there is where the bow of the sub is.
It's a big ramming rod with a torpedo at the end of it, basically a powder keg.
Right on up.
All right.
To sink the enemy vessel, the Hunley had to slam its torpedo into the Housatonic's hull and then back off, leaving behind a bomb filled with 135 pounds of black powder.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to go back here and back the sub away and see if we can detonate this baby, all right? Okay. All right, so now we have the charge in the Housatonic. The Hunley crew is backing away.
Once out of range, it triggered the explosion by pulling a rope attached to detonators planted inside the charge.
The Housatonic has now sunk. The Hunley has made history. But here's the question I want to know.
Okay.
You're about 40 feet away.
Right.
As this 135 pounds of black powder goes off, what's that going to feel like?
I'm not really sure. I know about some tests that they did back then, but there's some doubts in my mind as exactly what would happen.
You know what? Well, there's only one way to find out.
How's that?
Let's build a mock-up and put it to the test.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Have some fun. All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
Yeah.
In our blast test, we'll be using the same explosive power that sank the Housatonic in 1864. Thanks to demolitions expert and ATF senior special agent Joe Boykin.
So I know you and Mike have talked about the charge that the Hunley carried. Tell me a little bit about how we're going to recreate that today.
Well, when you guys contacted us, I sat down and worked out some calculations of trying to estimate how much modern high explosives it would take to recreate the 135 pounds of confined black powder that the Hunley used to attack the Housatonic.
And so this is military-grade C4, right?
It is absolutely military-grade C4.
And it's very stable, from what I understand.
It's very stable. That's one of the reasons the military used it, because they didn't want it to go off, unless they wanted it to go off.
So I could juggle this and be safe.
Pretty much.
Okay. pretty much. That won't do it then. So how do you compare C4 with black powder? I mean, it seems like apples and oranges.
They are apples and oranges. Black powder is a low explosive, C4 is a high explosive. Most all explosives are measured by their TNT equivalent weights. 135 pounds of black powder is roughly equivalent to about 13 pounds of TNT.
Okay.
About 10 pounds of C4 will roughly equate 13 pounds of TNT.
And the all-important question is, how far away will we be when this goes off?
We'll be 500 feet away.
Okay.
There. You probably could be closer, but it's not advisable.
So that is our Hunley torpedo.
That is the Hunley torpedo.
All right. Let's pack it up.
All right.
We'll place our updated version of the Hunley's torpedo the same distance away from our mock-up of the sub as the Hunley was on that cold February night when it made history.
Everybody don't forget your earplugs.
We built our smaller scale watertight mock-up out of 55-gallon steel drums, rigging a compartment for a crewman. Then we mounted cameras in harm's way that capture the detonation close up. How will our replacement subs stand up to the explosion?
All right, let's go fire off our torpedo.
All right.
No one has ever undertaken a Hunley demolition experiment like this before digging for the truth. And it's dangerous to use a high explosive in a public waterway. It takes a lot of federal, state, and local law enforcement to make it happen. They even closed down the entire inlet just for us. All of Charleston wants to know what happened to the Hunley, the pride of the South. This test should answer several questions. Is this blast strong enough to have damaged the iron sub 50 feet away? Is this why the Hunley disappeared? And what would the blast have felt like to the crew?
All right, game time. What do you say?
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, Hunter, this is it. About 3 minutes after you pull that,
all right,
the orange inner tube out there that's holding our demolition charge is going to go away.
Let's clear our guys and do it. Boom. Here we go. 3 minutes and counting. All right.
Hey,
nice job.
Look at the size of that.
Wow.
You.
Look, it looks like we're still floating for now. I mean, it shot up, what, 40, 50 feet almost?
Maybe 100. It was up there pretty high.
From a distance, it appears our mock-up was only rocked by the waves created by the explosion. Close up, the outside looks good. And inside, our crewman is in perfect shape. This same exact charge was big enough to sink the Housatonic, yet only 50 feet away, our Hunley mock-up is fine. Back in port, we get a look at what the camera on the mock-up captured.
Right about where the explosion should take place.
Whoa!
Whoa, look at that.
Look at all that coming out.
That second one.
But I mean,
Here's the big wave.
yeah, the thing that I see is that the initial shock really wasn't that much on the,
it wasn't
on the
bad.
sub. So it makes it seem as if it was very survivable.
Yes, absolutely. I think the sub did survive.
Yeah.
From this test, we can assume that the water absorbs a great deal of the explosive force. This seems to prove that the torpedo that sank the Housatonic didn't stop Dixon's pocket watch, and it didn't sink the Hunley.
Now, I know this is a crude experiment, but there's a couple of valuable lessons here. The first being, there's no visible battle damage down here at the end closest to the explosion. There's a possibility the crew could have been deafened and disoriented by the explosion, or the boat possibly could have been swamped. But if Lieutenant Dixon and his crew did survive, what happened to them? It's time to test out some other theories.
Coming up next, a little piece of metal revealed for the first time may finally solve the Hunley mystery. With our own experiment, we proved that the Hunley almost certainly survived the blast of its own torpedo. And the time on Lieutenant Dixon's watch can provide a true timeline, since it coincides with the attack on the Housatonic. So where does that lead our team? Back to the archaeologists at the Warren Lash Center and their newest discovery.
You need to come up here to the bow. So you
I
have
don't
to
fit in this place. Too tall. Okay.
It's okay. You're seeing the forward conning tower.
Yeah,
right?
there's a big hole in it.
Right. And the question is,
When did that hole become a part of this submarine?
well, you're pretty lucky because just recently we were down on the bottom inside the submarine removing some pig iron ballast blocks, and they were concreted to the bottom, and right next to them we found...
And this is at Lieutenant Dixon's station,
exactly.
right? Is this under Lieutenant Dixon's body?
Underneath Lieutenant Dixon's body, at the very, very bottom, underneath the sediment, at the very bottom, we find this piece of metal, cast iron. Now, why is that interesting?
Because this is not cast iron, but the conning towers are made of cast iron.
Most of the stuff is made out of wrought iron, but that conning tower is made out of cast iron.
They found a piece of metal directly below the forward conning tower. Because it's made of cast iron, it must have come from that conning tower. Even more important, they found it beneath the sediment on the very bottom of the sub.
Beneath the sediment.
Oh, wow.
So before sediment even comes in, that piece is on the bottom, which suggests it's very early.
This could have been blown out while it was on the surface then. This is something that may have happened when they blew up the Housatonic right after it started to sink to the bottom.
But I hope that we have enough information there that we can actually try to determine what caused the damage, and if it's a ballistic impact, if we can determine the angle and the velocity that is required to cause that damage.
And maybe hit it with a bullet at the right place, right time.
Perhaps.
This opening used to be a porthole that matched the other side of the tower. We know soldiers on the Housatonic fired small arms at the Hunley as it skimmed across the surface to deliver its deadly torpedo. Could they have shot out a piece of cast iron from the front? This could be the smoking gun archaeologists have been looking for.
So what's our evidence that this may have fit a porthole? What are the size? What's the size of the glass?
Well, that's the thing. The mystery of this is that we don't have the glass from that porthole. The glass is gone, but we have the glass for the corresponding.
The one on the other side.
Porthole, exactly, and that's in here. It's extremely fragile.
So fragile we can't touch it.
But we have a drawing here.
Okay.
And you can see it has a very distinct diameter.
And this is drawn to scale, so it's exactly the same size as this piece here.
It has that distinct curvature. If that curvature matches to the diameter of this flange.
And if it does, then you know that this piece came from around a porthole.
And if that's the case, we certainly know that this damage occurred very, very early.
And when you say very early, you mean?
Before any sediment comes into the structure. And we know that happens almost immediately.
It happens even before the bodies decompose.
Before the body's fully decomposed. So if this is truly from the forward conning tower, we have evidence that we have damage on the forward conning tower very early.
Can I put this on here and see if the diameter fits?
What do you think?
That looks really good to me.
It's dead on. Yeah.
It looks perfect.
I think the diameter looks like it's a curvature very similar to the diameter of this porthole. I think the most important piece of evidence here is you have seen all the damage we have on the Hunley, but this is the first time I've gotten a clue that we may have a damage that's very early.
And so if I wanted to be imaginative, because you know I like to do that, if this happened before the bodies decompose, it is possible, even though we can't prove it, it is possible that small arms fire from the Housatonic shot out part of that porthole, maybe even killed Lieutenant Dixon. It's a possibility. It's an entryway for water, and it could be one of the reasons that the Hunley sank.
So it's a scenario, absolutely.
Scenario.
Something impacted that conning tower and knocked off a piece of the flange.
Was this small hunk of cast iron the chink in the Hunley's armor, the entry point for enough water to sink the sub? This evidence is so new the jury's still out, but the possibility is compelling. Here's what we do know. The crew cranked 4 miles out from shore to attack the Housatonic. They had to be exhausted, and very possibly feeling the negative effects of carbon dioxide poisoning. Skimming along the surface of the water, they're vulnerable to small arms fire. They could have taken a hit on the porthole of Dixon's conning tower. Even a small hole in this spot could let in enough water to upset the sub's buoyancy. For a little unstable vessel like the Hunley, it wouldn't have taken much. We also know the men's bones were found unmixed at their stations, so whatever sank the submarine happened fast. And thanks to the pocket watch, which very possibly stopped ticking when it was inundated with water only minutes after the attack, we have a timeline that helps piece together the deadly sequence of events. Today, we're closer than ever before to knowing why the HL Hunley went down. But the sub's archaeologists aren't through yet. They'll continue to probe every clue in search of a final answer. But whatever they determine, it will never overshadow the dedication of 8 brave men who made history and changed the course of naval warfare forever.